Aloha. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us again this week. And we're going to be working on relationship skills, a guide to healthy communication and conflict resolution. So I'm going to go ahead and share some slides with you as we get started. So we will be doing our second piece in here and are joined by Dr. Kainoa Kaneakua, a licensed marriage and family therapist who is helping teach us some of the skills that will be helpful in our relationships. Last week, we talked about our first skill, which is learning to take breaks, how to do that in a healthy and appropriate way with your partner or the person that you care about. This week, we're going to be talking about looking for a win-win scenario. And if you're joining us next week, we'll be talking about listening with as much intensity as you want to be listened to. So just a little bit of information before we get started. This is brought to you by Mental Health America of Hawaii. You can contact us at info@mentalhealthhawaii.org or go to our website if you're looking for some resources or referrals at mentalhealthhawaii.org. Also, our numbers are 808-521-1846. We are available Monday through Friday. And if you're in the Maui County, you would call 808-242-6461. And if you're wanting to check out some of our social media accounts, we have a Facebook general, which is at Mental Health America of Hawaii. And we also have 3 Facebook groups. So we have our Busy Bees Keiki Activities groups that has really cool arts and crafts, books recommendations, and some gardening tips. We also have our Live in the Na'au, which is on Instagram. So if you decide that you want to check out Facebook, check out our groups for the Busy Bees, the MHAH Maui, and the MHAH Book Club, or follow us on Instagram at Live Now. So we're going to go ahead and move into our skill for the week. So thank you for joining us today, Dr. Kainoa Kaneakua. Let's talk about the first skill that we were looking at, which is how to create a win-win. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, and thanks for having me back again.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
win-win part I actually got from Stephen Covey. So back in, like, I think it was the late 80s, he wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those habits was win-win, look for a win-win or go into a situation with a win-win. And when it comes to relationships is to go into a discussion that you want to have with your partner, thinking both of us are going to be able to get something beneficial out of this. If you walk into it thinking, I need to dominate and win this conversation, or if I know that I'm upset and that this might be a fight, I've got to win this, then it's going to escalate, like we talked about last week about escalation and where that will get you. And it'll be something most likely that isn't going to be beneficial for either of you.
Perfect. So let's talk about, because with a lot of time spent at home and a lot of time spent together, sometimes small things become rather large things. How do you approach a win-win conversation? Because that's really what we're talking about, is how to interact with your partner or your loved one in a way that creates an opportunity to have both sides heard, validated, and having both be a win-win. How do you do that when you're already feeling very frustrated and, maybe annoyed, maybe overwhelmed? How do you approach a win-win scenario with the right kind of mindset?
Mm-hmm. So kind of similar to what we talked about last week is hopefully everyone will be able, or you'll be able to understand what your frustration is, where it comes from, what's happening for you, because that really helps with understanding what things are about. So that's kind of like the first thing, is to be very clear on what it is that you want to discuss. And I also want to say that this doesn't mean that you can't have your own opinion about something. You can have an opinion about something, a belief in something, and not have to compromise that with your partner, or um, think less of what you believe in. Um, this is in the case of if you're looking to discuss something that for both of you is going to be important, that you both need some type of agreement on. And what you had said about trying to go in there for that agreement, for an understanding, that's like on the top of the list when it comes to win-win. I want to be understood, and I also want to understand where my partner is coming from. So what the first thing is, if you're feeling that frustration, if you're feeling these things come up for you, understand what they are, where they're coming from, and then identify like how is that going to work for you. when it comes to talking with your partner. Because if it's going to escalate, if it's going to get too high, like we talked about before, it'll lead into something that's not going to go to a good place.
You mentioned being clear on what you want. So what would be
Mm-hmm.
some really like concrete ways to be clear about what you want? Some helpful
So
like communication tips.
yeah, as human beings, we're very reactive. So something happens, we react. So at a basic level, like if you see you're walking on a trail, all of a sudden a big, huge bear jumps in front of you. We react in a natural way to with the fight, flight, freeze that we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a natural reaction. We just react. That's just how it is. So in order for us to be understood, to understand what's going on for our partner, we go in with understanding for ourselves, like what it is that I want to get to, what it is that I want to talk about, what it is that's really hitting me at my core. So, for example, you could be with a partner that maybe they have a favorite program or something that they like to watch every day, and you want to spend time with them. You want to have some um, time to speak, to talk, to just maybe not talk at all, just spend time together. You hear that TV click on, you hear like the intro to the show or whatever it is, and that starts a reaction for you because what you really want is time with your partner. What happens is the reaction of that show that's going to suck that 30 minutes to an hour or whatever it might be, or worst case scenario, if it's going to be on like streaming, that it's going to be binge watch and then you have no idea like when it is you're going to be able to get in there with time. So it's not necessarily the show that your partner's watching. It is that I want time with this person.
Mm.
And so that is what to be clear on, because that helps in going in and discussing what that means rather than shut that TV off. Every time you come home or every time you're here at this time at night, you automatically watch that.
I think that's a really good like beginning point, I think, to the win-win scenario that you
Mm-hmm.
talked about is this idea of like knowing what you want and identifying it, because you really can so easily get stuck in this kind of tug of war about a TV show, and it's really just not about that. I think that's just really important to understand that sometimes when you find yourself in these like pull and push moments, to ask yourself, is it really about the taking the trash out or the TV show, like
Mm-hmm.
what's really at the heart of it. So I love that so much. What other things do you think that people can bring to the table for a win-win scenario?
When it comes to win-win, you want to take things seriously with your partner. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like a serious discussion every single time. There
Mm.
can be lightheartedness, there can be levity, there can be all types of things. When your partner comes to you and says, I'd like to talk to about something or something's on my mind, really take that to heart for yourself as a signal that your partner wants to engage with you. And maybe you might not be ready for a discussion or something that's gonna be a little bit too much for you at the time, and that happens. I mean, if you've had a really hard day at
Mm.
work or whatever it might be, and you feel a little bit flush with a lot of things that are overwhelming for you right in the moment, it might be hard to engage. So there should be trust between the two of you that if you can say that to your partner, I would love to hear what you have to say. I really do want to, understand where you're coming from or what you're saying. Right now, I just have a lot of stuff that's just on my mind. I'm flooded with it. If I could have time, just to settle down for a little bit, and we can talk about it maybe in like half an hour or so, or whatever it might be. But the trust for one another of if I come to you and I say this is important to me, I do want to know that you're going to respond to that. And if you can't respond to it in the moment, at least respond to me and let me know. And then when can we get together for the engagement part?
Absolutely. I think that's just such an important piece. of being like a great communicator and a really great listener is to look at the person that you're about to have that conversation with, and not only ask yourself, like, did they seem to be in a place where they can be open and have that conversation, but also to ask the person themselves, like, are you open to having this conversation? This is kind of what I'm wanting to talk about, because we don't know what's happened throughout the day, or other pieces that might play a role in it. So I love that, because it's so easy to kind of fall into the assumption that we're always in a good place to have that conversation, and that's just not true. And we want to start off on like the best foot forward that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I love that.
And I also noticed, and I just want to throw in here, that the language I'm using may not be the language that you use, the people listening, you use in your partnership. I'm
Yes.
saying, I would like to speak with you about something important to me. Those are the words I'm using for that. That might not ever be a way that you conversate with your partner. You may say it in a different way, like, Dave, I got something on my mind. So however it works for you folks, whatever it is the thing that lands the most, has the most weight for you folks, and you hear it and you know, okay, when I hear this, I know it means something. Then that's what works for you folks. So the way that I'm putting things is just like more, I think, like academic kind of way of coming at it, but yeah, definitely make it your own.
Absolutely. I think that, for some partners, if they were to hear it the way that we talk about it, because maybe we have a little bit more of a clinical voice, I think that if they were to approach their partner and have that conversation, be like, I have a very important conversation to have with you, and I'm wondering if you have a few minutes. And they would immediately be like, what's happening? And be
Mm-hmm.
like a little bit like on the defensive, like something weird's happening, and this isn't how you normally talk about things. So yeah,
Yeah.
making sure that it is authentic to you and how you communicate in your relationship, and knowing, because I've worked with people who like try to write things down and like memorize them verbatim, and I would always say, like, no, really make it your own, because then it really feels like you're engaging with your partner when you do that, or you're engaging with your loved one, because otherwise it just sounds like it's me, it's coming out of your voice, and it's not really your piece. So absolutely, I love the idea of trying to make situations and conversations into win-wins. I know that having worked with couples in the past, sometimes there is a concern about if there's a pervasive pattern of not win-wins, of when there has been this idea of when we have these conversations that someone typically gets the win and someone typically has the loss, that it could be challenging to them, the person who's taking the loss typically, and even the person who typically gets the win, because that's a shift in the dynamic. It could be difficult for them to go in with a mindset of there can be both people having an outcome where they both feel good about it. What would you tell people who are kind of stuck in those patterns of, or have had previous patterns of that?
Yeah. So what I want to say to that is something I should have brought up the last time that we were speaking, where it comes to, now this is the extreme part of it. If you're in a relationship that is viewed by many as an abusive relationship,
Mm,
sometimes people are in those relationships and don't really see them as abusive. But
mm,
if you have good friends or someone that you can relate to that can point that out to you, if you read like literature on what intimate partner violence is or domestic violence, what that is, and that resonates with you, then definitely, if you're finding yourself in a situation where, okay, I'm on the losing side every time, I
mm,
don't have a win in this with my partner, then consider that there might be some safety issues in there. That's at the extreme.
mm,
Now, when it comes to having a pattern of, I lose quite often, or I have to feel like I have to win often, or something like that, that mindset of give and take in that respect can lay out a very bad pattern for a relationship. It
mm,
could lead to isolation. It could lead to I don't want to say that it is a reason for infidelity, but there is a high correlation between that type of pattern and having infidelity in the relationship. So it doesn't excuse away the act of infidelity, but It does happen to be there quite often when
Mm-hmm.
there's that. Um, so for those who find themselves in that pattern, the thing to understand is win-win is exactly that. We both win. I look for as much ways to help you win as you look for as much ways to help me win. So when we get together and when we have these conversations, when we go over things, there might be things that I can't get across for some reason or another. That's not actually a loss. That is just for some reason this thing that I'm trying to communicate to my partner, who probably does really try to want to understand but just can't get it. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Just for some reason, it's not catching for both of us, and that's okay because we're trying, we're working at it, and we both are in it together. So that's a win. That's a win for both of us. So there doesn't always have to be agreement on things. There doesn't always have to be we feel great about everything after this conversation. The biggest thing is I know that my partner is in it as much for me as I am in it as much for them. That is the biggest thing that should be there.
Absolutely. I think that really speaks to the trust that has to be there in the relationship to
Mm-hmm.
know that the other partner is doing that and trying to fulfill that, but also kind of this concept that's very difficult for us, which is the idea of vulnerability, because that lies at the heart of being able to trust someone is also saying like that makes me vulnerable to possibly, not get my needs met if my partner doesn't step up for that. But that's also how we build trust, is to put that out there and to try and keep working on that. And I think that you highlighted something that was really important, which is this idea that sometimes we can be communicating something and actually communicating it repeatedly and it just not catch. I think that we just assume that when we do really great communication that the content and meaning will be crossed over and people will understand that. But I think if you think back in the games we learned when we were very young, like the telephone game, just how quickly a message can change from person to person, and how just trying it a little bit of a different way to try to get the meaning across, but changing how you do it, the words that you select, maybe even like the examples that you're using, just to see if it can budge, because it can be difficult even when it seems like, I told them 15 times, like, why aren't they getting this? And really it's just because like you're throwing the same pitch 15 times, like they're just not going to get it that way. So I love that you highlighted that, because that can be a challenge for people. What other things do you think would be helpful to make a win-win successful?
Um, well, before we go on with that, I do want to highlight the trust part.
Mm,
Trust is so very important, and it's just an right out there kind of thing that we know that it's important. Everybody knows trust is important in relationships. If you are in a situation where, say, you have agreement with your partner, say you have had a conversation, it feels deep, it feels like both of you have been able to express yourselves and there's understanding, there is action that needs to happen after that. So it's not just in the moment of what things are. So like last week I talked about like things that have to happen before you
mm-hmm.
get into a situation where you need to take a break in an argument. Same thing goes for this, that there are things that you need to build up before with each other. Trust, I talked about engagement and knowing that your partner is going to be responsive. So all that takes a while to build up that with a partner. The thing that happens after the conversation is just as important, if not more. Because if we have agreement on something, if I say to my partner, okay, I get it, I understand that I have been like kind of drifting away and not showing you as much affection as I should, and I hear you, I should show more affection. If I then go back to my same old pattern, I don't change anything, then intellectually, in my mind, cognitively, I know what this is. And yet, if I don't take action, if I don't do anything about it, if I don't then the next morning wake up and kiss my partner, if I've never done that before, or like write a love note and stick it somewhere where they can find it. If I don't do something and continue to do the somethings along the way, my partner loses faith in me, loses that
Mm,
trust. And then the next time we have a conversation, maybe about the same thing, maybe about something else, in the mind of my partner is, you didn't come through the last time. You told me all this stuff. It sounded really good, but you didn't come through. And because you didn't come through, I trust you less this time.
Mm.
And the more that pattern continues of inaction to follow up on what you've agreed to or what the person has said they're going to do, then it becomes more and more or the other partner or both are going to have less trust in the word of their partner. And that will lead to a lot of isolation. That will lead to a lot of probably more fighting, probably less engagement. So yeah, it could lead to a lot of things. So there definitely trust is a big deal.
You mentioned accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement, which actually comes out of emotionally focused couples therapy. We mentioned Sue Johnson last week. So if you're looking for some really good books on that, you can find that on our Facebook account under the MHAH Book Club. We have 2, Hold Me Tight and Love Sense, that are on our recommendation list for our monthly read. So please check those out if you're wanting to get more information about that. I think those are 3 critical things to look at in terms of, like, is my partner available to me? Is he or she, are they responding to kind of the conversation that we're having? And then are they engaged in the relationship? Are they engaged in the win-win and trying to, like, find some place for us to have resolution? So yeah, thank you for bringing those up. Any other pieces that you think are really important for a win-win in creating one or keeping one going?
I think I would say that finding joy in your partner should be a key to this as well. So, for instance, we've been talking about agreement to things and understanding. There might be sometimes that a partner has a request of you that you have no interest in whatsoever. So, like, say your partner is having a birthday and it might be a very significant birthday for them, and they say to you, it would mean so much to me if, and whatever comes after the if can be whatever. So say it's like, I want to go to the Janet Jackson concert in wherever it's going to be. And you are someone who particularly doesn't enjoy concerts, doesn't like large crowds, doesn't want to be in any space that has that. And so on a regular day, this would be an automatic no for you. When it comes to the joy, finding the joy in your partner, not necessarily the activity, it can come to that. You are most likely going to do things that don't spark interest in you at all. But because it means so much to your partner, you're going to invest in it. You're going to say, okay, we can do this.
Absolutely. I think that, even that is done with a balance to it. So you can't always start every sentence with, like, this is really important to me, so you should want to do this thing, right?
Yes.
Because, right, use it judiciously, use it when it really, really does mean something, that it really is important, because we also want your partners to be able to have, or your loved ones to be able to have the freedom to do those things and share them with people who do enjoy those outings. And, it's always about a balance and a support system and a team that you have in your life, where you can share your likes with some people, but also just share time, enjoy it with people who might not enjoy that activity. So I love the idea of making sure that you're creating that fun and that joy in your relationship, because it is so crucial to have so much positivity in it. And with things being so stressful right now, and so much time together, but not in a way that is always facilitating quality time, that it is important to try to build those moments and to counterbalance that anxiety and stress with laughter. I mean, that's so crucial in all experiences. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kainoa Kaneakua, for joining us again this week. I think that it's a lot of information for people to take in terms of how to create these win-wins and how to move forward in being vulnerable and having trust in your partnership and breaking out of maybe old patterns, if that's what you're looking at. I think as the series continues to grow and we continue to talk about these communication skills and relationship skills, it's so important to kind of do the homework to bring it home and to practice it, and to ask yourself, like, what other things do I need, and see if there's anything else that we offer. If you have any, like, questions or suggestions, please call us or email us at info@mentalhealthhawaii.org. But thank you so much again for coming with us, Dr. Kainoa Kaneakua, on this journey journey. And everyone else who's joining us today, we look forward to another week next week in learning another new skill. So thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week.